I'm here in the middle of the woods in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. As you might be able to tell, I'm sitting rather, on an old railroad grade, but what you might not be able to tell is that for 30 years, a bustling coal mining town once stood in this area. So how is it that what was once supposed to be the most promising coal town in the region suddenly disappears from the map, and has been off the map now for over a century? Well, I'm Knowles. I'm here to explore and explain. So the only people traveling through this area now are the deer, as you can see with this deer trail behind me. But in 1884, the first railroad was built to this valley, and it was the Beech Creek Railroad. And what they did was, they were a subsidiary of the New York Central, and they had a sister company called the Clearfield Bituminous Coal Company. And the sole purpose of this railroad was to extract coal from these hills, because if you didn't know, Clearfield County is at the center of the bituminous region in Pennsylvania. So here is one foundation pit that's left. I've seen a couple of these since we've been walking around so far, but this is the most visible because of this pond of water that's accumulated at the bottom. And you can see up there is the old road that was one of 2 streets in Gazzam, or maybe 3 streets at one time. And behind us is the railroad grade, so there would have just been a row of coal patch houses along in here. And I guess this means that they did have basements, but there's no stones left, there's no rafters left, there's no steps or anything else. It's just this pit in the middle of the woods now. Okay, I was wrong about no stones. All I should have done is moved about 5 feet to the right here. There's this trail of stones, and I don't know if this would have been an old wall or if this is a collapsed piece of the house or what. But then you move over here, there's an old well right here. All these mossy stones, and I don't know how deep that goes. I don't really want to find out. So we walked up the road a little bit, and there's another foundation pit over here. This one has some kind of cement box, I guess, in the front of it. I don't know if this would have been a trough for water or something akin to a root cellar. I don't know what it would be. If you have any ideas, leave them in the comments below. But you can tell there was a house here at one point. And there's a couple newer houses that have been built in the intervening years since 1913, when the town was torn down. And a woman told me that over there where that house is, there used to be a mule shed, and I know that there used to be a tavern in here, and there used to be, I think, a couple churches and a school and a baseball field. The town actually had their own baseball team called the Gazzam Reds, and that's pretty common among coal towns, you know, to have everything that you need in the town so that your workers don't have to leave to go elsewhere, and they can stay in the town and be good little coal miners for you. Some signs of the springtime in Gazzam, Pennsylvania. Look at these little wildflowers. Now, the railroad is pretty much the sole reason that this town existed in the first place. As I alluded to at the beginning, the New York Central and the Pennsylvania Railroad especially, when they operated in northern Pennsylvania, they wanted access to these coal lands because their locomotives required such huge amounts of steam power, coal power, to operate all the freight that they carried across Pennsylvania and the whole Northeast. So the northern part of the bituminous coal fields in this area went almost entirely into feeding locomotives, whereas the southern part of the bituminous coal field went into making coke for the steel centers in Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Chicago, etc. So here's some evidence of railroad. The old railroad grade, you can see there. I'm not sure exactly what direction this is going. I think that's northeast that way, and that'd be southwest that way. And there's this culvert crossing over Gazzam Run. So Gazzam was named for Joseph Gazzam, who was I don't even think he was the president. I think he was just a board member of both Clearfield Bituminous Coal and the Beech Creek Railroad, both of which ended up being owned by the New York Central just a few years after Gazzam was built in 1884. So I'm going to get up on top of here. Now, this railroad branch wasn't a branch when it was built. Gazzam was the terminus of the Beech Creek Railroad, and that made it really important as the terminus point. And then later on, a few miles up the branch in Kermore, they built an extension of the railroad all the way over to Mahaffey, Pennsylvania. and that made this the Gazzam branch rather than just the terminus of the railroad. It kind of lessened its importance. Wow, this is almost totally collapsed on this side. Huh. But that's kind of the beginning of the end, so to speak, for Gazzam, and that was as early as, I think, 1890. And then Gazzam was bought by another coal company in 1913. All the buildings, or at least all the towns, all the houses in town were built and shipped to another coal mining town called Carnwath, which is a few miles down the road, for a different coal mining company, which is just kind of funny to think that you can do something like that. Just buy up a town, dismantle the houses, move them elsewhere, and have a new town. Anyway, look at that. The power of water. There's an article in the Clearfield Progress from 1940 reminiscing on Gazzam, calling it the lively little metropolis in the wilderness. Now it's just a nice spot to come and drive around and think about the places we call home. What will they look like in 30 years? 100 years? 1,000? When your town has wooden homes built pretty much as cheaply as possible, it's not surprising that nothing would be left. And obviously some places stick around long into the future. Ever heard of a place called Rome? But even though a lot of Pennsylvania's coal mining heritage is still present, in road names, tipple ruins, rows of patch houses, and big slag dumps, it's important to remember that some things can be gone just like that. I had hoped to find the old cemetery in Gazzam because from what I'd read, the cemetery was still at least, consisting of a few stones within the last few years, but we drove around, we couldn't find it. So the next best thing we figured is further up on the old Beach Creek Railroad is a railroad tunnel. We're just a few miles north of Gazzam, and I don't know if the railroad tunnel is in good enough shape to even be recognizable as a railroad tunnel. I'm not sure when the railroad went out of service, and I don't know if you could walk through the tunnel, if I can get some good shots of it, but I figure I'd try and show you guys something else cool in the area. And then what I'd like to do after this is go to the town where I believe the old houses from Gazzam were moved to. I've heard conflicting reports on which town it was, but based on some research that I've done, I think it's a local town just a few miles down the road, so we're hopefully going to stop there afterwards, and you get to see the second life of the Gazzam houses. So I'm going to keep going through the woods here and let you know if I find a railroad tunnel. Okay, update. We've walked down the trail a little bit further, and we're really high up on a cliff relative to the mouth of the tunnel, but we did find it. I don't know how good that shows up on camera, but the portal is still intact, except that it's filled with what looks to be at least 2 feet of water down there. I'm hoping to go down the hill a little further and get a head-on shot. Look at that thing, just out here in the middle of the forest.
I know I'll be able to make it. You know, it's that weird old zone you're
I know, I'm almost 25. All right, we've come down. We made our way down a steep hill to the old railroad grade. That way, a few miles down, is where Gazzam is located. Off of the old branch line, and then come around this way. Look at that thing. Pitch black. I don't even think that tunnel's that long, so I'm wondering if the other side isn't caved in. This would be the south portal. Boy, is that scary.